Welcome to Life Science Success Podcast. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I'm a consultant in life sciences. I help companies manage complexity and increase performance. It's an early morning this morning, but we are here with Chris Leidli. And just before we get started, I wanted to quickly mention again, I have on my website an organizational maturity assessment for anybody who would want to take it. Essentially, what it's looking for and trying to help companies with is factors that will help your organization scale or prevent you from scaling in the future. So in this episode of the Life Science Success Podcast, my guest is Chris Leidli. He's the founder and managing partner of Boulder Biotech Launch Specialists. His organization helps companies enhance product positioning and communications while improving operational launch readiness. He's also a podcaster and a TEDx speaker. So welcome, Chris.
Hey, good morning, Don. Nice to be on the podcast with you today.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. So could you tell the listeners just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I mean, most people kind of know me as sort of an experienced commercialization leader, having spent roles in big pharma like Bayer and Sanofi and J&J, working in global and U.S. roles, launching new products to the world, mostly in oncology. It's where most of my career has been spent. But I've also spent some time in the CNS world and inflammation and autoimmune diseases as well. But what's interesting is kind of where I started from, my roots, and it's interesting as we talk today, Don, because in many ways I've come back to my roots, and I'll explain more in a little bit. But I was a graduate level, a master's level scientist in the labs at Amgen almost 2 decades ago. You know, back then, the big scientific revolution was recombinant DNA technology, being able to clone, express, and purify therapeutic proteins for human use. It was amazing. It was an amazing breakthrough. And the giants back then were Amgen, Biogen, Genentech. And I was fortunate enough to work in the labs at Amgen as in their cancer biology and autoimmune disease lab as a molecular cell biologist. So immuno-oncologists, we were studying T cells and B cells that today are really becoming, real therapies. So in some ways, I'm coming back to my roots, and I could talk more about that as we go on today.
Yeah, really interesting. And then now you're helping, more organizations, I guess, sort of orient themselves in this space and be ready for commercial launch. I understand.
That's right, Don. I think I've really, with Boulder Biotech Launch Specialists, really looking to build a company into a leadership position around biologics, cell and gene therapy commercialization. There are hundreds of companies and thousands of trials right now underway in the U.S. Exploring new biologics, cell and gene therapies to treat various types of human diseases. So that's the niche that we're trying to serve and really help these companies bring products to market.
Yeah, and then the companies that you normally work with, what sort of stage are they oftentimes in?
Well, it's interesting. What really gets me excited are these pre-commercial companies that are, building a company is what, is so exciting. And I've been a part of a couple of small company build outs, helping them build the company, build the product, build the market type of work. Many of my clients are still pre-commercial, early and small. They don't have commercial teams. They may only have a chief operating officer and a head of business development. So coming in and helping them kind of build their scientific platform, the development strategy, and getting their go-to-market strategy done. That's kind of what I love doing. But on the other hand, I've also had big pharma reach out because trying to find specialized talent who really understands the cell and gene space is difficult. And so I've been able to kind of help some of these companies guide their strategies for moving into this market.
Yeah, it's interesting to me to hear that as well, because I kind of look at my customer base as the same. So it's kind of those early to just past initial funding, but kind of still on that path of growing. But then, also I've had similar sort of experience where big pharma reaches out and, what the heck? I mean, you may as well, sort of work with people that need your expertise as well.
That's right. Yeah.
So what brought you to the point of, wanting to build Boulder Biotech Launch Specialists?
Mm. Well, Don, after years of sort of working in industry and working in different roles, as I mentioned, in big pharma companies, small molecule companies, smaller startup biotech companies, I've seen agencies and consultants come in and I just thought that I could do a good job at this, number one. And number two, I thought because of the breadth and depth of experience that I have, sort of not being a career consultant, but having been spent 2 decades on the client side, I know their pain points. I know this sort of from a multifunctional view. So from clinical to commercial, I understand what it takes to successfully launch a product in today's market, which by the way, isn't the same as it was 2 decades ago or 10 years ago. It's evolved a lot, and we could talk about that. So I just thought I could do a good job at this. And I think it's about, Don, it's about trying to have a bigger impact. When you work for one company, you work for one company, but, working with multiple clients now, I just feel like I can make a bigger impact, um, by helping multiple different clients.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And then, you and I have talked about this before that, I mean, because I think I've even mentioned it on previous episodes of the podcast as well, that, I've worked with the bigger agencies. I know that they show up and they tell you, hey, look, everything is well understood by them, and that, they'll come in and sort of tailor something for you. But the reality is, after having lived it and bought it before, all of a sudden they show up and it's a preset sort of recipe that they're trying to then, somewhat fit to you, which doesn't really fit. It's almost like, expecting, I guess, custom clothes, or a design built house, and all of a sudden you show up and it's something that was honestly made for somebody else, and doesn't fit so well. So
Yeah, I mean that's the business model for many of these bigger, larger management consulting companies. That's how they, because the economics work so that they can. That's how they have to run their business. But I think that's also in many ways my secret sauce and your secret sauce, Don. Being a smaller bespoke company, we're fit for purpose. Number one, I think it's important because I think clients like to sit across the table from someone who knows who has done this work, who knows their pain points, and who's relatable in that way.
right.
So, I think that's a key differentiator. I like to position myself as sort of like, we're not big career consultants, but rather folks that have been in your shoes. We bring this cross-functional expertise. We've done this before to reassure and give confidence. There has to be trust and confidence with your clients to be able to know that you have the expertise and capabilities, to help them solve their problems.
Yeah. And then where do you normally start? I guess whenever you come in with a brand new client, where, what is sort of the starting point for you? What do you normally do?
Yeah, well, we have a 360 launch accelerator platform, and within that platform, what I like to do, like, no one can come in and tell you, when you're writing that proposal for a client, it's always very challenging without really running a diagnostic. So what I really prefer to do is come in for 30. We have a 30-day launch diagnostic where we come in and just assess sort of the organization, interview people internally, and just kind of assess and understand what information do they have, what insights do they have from the market, what is their current plan. Talk to the folks about, like, what are their current pain points, what is the problems and challenges that they're having, and then there may be skills gaps, talent gaps, but also just insight gaps. And I want to know what those are. And because only then can you kind of work with client to kind of put together a roadmap around recommendations and how to move them to their business objective. And that's different from company to company in terms of, are you just trying to get from phase one to phase two? Are you trying to, are you getting ready to file that BLA? Those clients require different type of support and scaling capabilities and sort of building that sort of go-to-market strategy, Don. So it's hard. So what I love to do is, and it's not always possible because some clients have rapid, timelines that don't allow you to really do that diligence. But I really prefer to just do that diagnostic up front and come forward with a set of recommendations for the client to select from.
Yeah. And what do you see some of the biggest challenges are for clients that you have, as you help different clients in this space?
Yeah, well, let's focus maybe on the smaller stage biotech companies, since there's so many of them. I think the challenges they faced on is access to capital. So they're generally on smaller budgets. That also means they often defer making important strategic decisions. They may think they know kind of how things should be. Many of them are scientific founders and probably think that we can worry about the commercialization once we get solid phase 3 data or whatever, or filing pivotal data. And unfortunately, that's just too late today. That's not enough time, especially with these advanced regenerative medicines, cell and gene therapies. You have to be working closely with your physicians, your healthcare providers, with treatment centers. And this is a process that can take several years. So I think the challenges I see is that still waiting too long, not fully understanding how the healthcare ecosystem in the US is evolving, and care coordination for these patients. We're seeing today that many patients aren't really benefiting from cell therapies. They don't have access to it because of the way multidisciplinary care is delivered in the US. So there's a lot of challenges that need to be solved beyond just the product, and sort of getting it through clinical trials. And that's where I really want to get in early and really help them with the strategy, with sort of helping them build that roadmap and then implementing it towards as they get closer and closer to market.
Yeah, and what I've seen is that it's so important to have kind of those early insights as well, because one, it sort of opens up, you mentioned capital. So, it opens up this idea of, hey, here's all of these other people that are also saying that we need this out in the market. So, we really do need this. But then, secondly, I feel like it builds that initial excitement, as well, before, something's actually out.
And Don, and we've talked about like fractional support too. I think this is an important concept that hasn't really taken a stronghold especially in the life science industry. But the idea of the traditional way of, oh, we'll hire our chief commercial officer, who will hire the head of marketing, who will hire the head of sales, the head of market access. They come in and hire their teams below them, and now this is a huge expense to the company.
Yeah.
And they often wait until they really know that they have a product. I like the idea of fractional, like coming in as support, as nimble support to bring in market access or scientific or marketing support, digital support in a fractional way, where they can hire us to fill skills gaps and help evolve their product and their companies, advance their company's capabilities without having to hire the full commercial team. Certainly much more cost efficient. But that's an area that I think there's still a lot of opportunity. And I think people bring their sort of legacy way of launching products and building companies still. And we're in a different world now with the technology and access to talent that I'd like to see that evolve.
Yeah, certainly if all of your experience up to this, well, let's kind of break this down into a couple of different pieces, right? So if all of your experience up to this point was only big pharma, and you come in and you go to build a startup, and all of a sudden you find out that, hey, look, all of that big company infrastructure is gone. How do you, how do you still leverage good people's experience without having to hire, people for big salaries, essentially, which essentially is what, larger companies are able to do. And that was sort of the problem that I was trying to solve with clients of mine who had said, hey, look, I like the fact that you offer, project management and quality support, and you can also do some of this process improvement stuff. I'd like to have it all bundled together, and, would want to hire you full time. Well, that's not an option. So, can we sort of break this up so that it's more affordable for you? And also, something that I can offer, more across other clients. And then what you're saying as well is that there's the same exact need on the commercial side. And, I love that idea.
There absolutely is that need, and you're exactly right, Don. I think I could give examples. Just anonymously. I've seen sort of big pharma commercial talent go to small companies, and this is very recent companies. And the first thing, they're going right to the big agencies, brand agencies, doing like, let's start our brand campaign, our glossy kind of picture and image for the brand. This is so like 1980s, 1990s way of launching a product. And what are we missing, right? What's missing here? Access to healthcare providers is down. It wasn't great before COVID, and we've changed in a way. We're not going back to the pre-COVID days. Healthcare providers are pressed for time. We need to learn how to do storytelling and provide better content for educating and promoting to healthcare providers. And the traditional way of doing things is still being done by a lot of folks, especially like you said, those coming from big pharma backgrounds with 25 years of experience. People tend to do what they know and what they're comfortable with, and are uncomfortable with, especially at a new place, at a small place, trying to do things differently.
Yeah. And I love some of the new, especially the new biotech, medicine creators that are out there. Some of them have said, hey, look, I'm going to do this entirely virtually. There's one particular CEO that I'm thinking of right now where he just said, hey, look, I'm going to make sure that my organization is 100% virtual. We're not going to have an office ever. And I mean, for me, that was a real sort of, there's a big sort of mental challenge I had to get over, in talking to him about, how specifically are you going to do all of this, right? How are you going to make this happen? But they're entering phase 1 clinical trials. So, I guess we'll see how it goes from here. But at the same time, it's like, again, to come back to what you're saying, there aren't many people that kind of come in with a new mindset and say, hey, look, I'm entirely going to do this differently. This one particular entrepreneur definitely is. And, I give him a lot of credit for, the way that he's approaching things as well.
Yeah, no, you're right, Don. You hear examples of companies who are moving in that direction, and they tend to be the younger companies that don't have all this legacy apparatus that they have to retool. They can start from the ground up and build it optimize it the way to meet customer needs. But, I think the bigger companies have sort of tried to evolve commercial models for years. This was already going on in the 1990s and 2000s. There was restructurings and so forth after sort of companies were building up their sales forces to these massive thousands persons, big sales forces for different, products. And now I just recall, companies kind of going through, like, marketing teams just being stuck, going from one national sales meeting to the next every 6 months and just preparing new marketing materials just for that meeting. They were very focused on personal selling and not as much on digital ways of working.
Yeah.
And they kind of relied that what happens, they added digital, and that it was like some separate department that had a separate budget, and it was like an afterthought, So it's like, it's not integrated in a way it could be in most big companies. And really, marketers need to take ownership of it, is what I'm seeing in terms of best practices. Really owning digital alongside their personal selling. And I think the personal selling model has to evolve into different types of roles too, where they're able to provide more values to providers. Because right now they're not getting into those offices more than maybe once a month, Don.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. And I'm like you, I'm also working with, bigger pharma companies as well. And they're saying, hey, look, certain teams will be in the office and certain, days of the week or days of the month. And, it's a lot of infrastructure to carry to try and be able to have a quote unquote office, but at the same time, from a collaboration standpoint, and sometimes especially on the operations side, primarily where I focus, there are times where you just have to get a team in the room for 2 or 3 days to sort of, let's go wrestle this problem down to, go figure it out. And in those cases, it's advantageous. However, in between time, it's still a lot to carry.
No, absolutely. I think that is, I think, the way things should evolve towards, is having specialized teams going in to sort of help with various brand challenges. And I know we've seen the industry experiment with different types of field forces now, like account managers, key account managers, and so forth, and thought leader liaisons, specialized talent to go in and provide different types of value to customers and education. So I think that's part of what we're working on, is trying to evolve and disrupt the model a bit. It's easier with a company that's building capabilities and to come in and even the way you produce content.
Yeah.
I mean, turning over content to a big agency to go out and create viz aids and banner ads is, to me, still very inefficient. Having some of those capabilities in house and working with a more agile provider like our shop, which is more nimble, can turn things around, and not as costly as a larger full service agency that's really costs thousands of dollars to do some of the work, and then you wonder if what that return on that investment is.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, using the new mediums to your advantage. I mean, I think LinkedIn, where we're broadcasting now, YouTube, where we're broadcasting now, certainly offer, opportunities for companies to try and get their word out, as well. They're just new ways of sort of approaching some of these things. I was reading something from McKinsey the other day that said that a lot of companies are projecting like an 82% increase in terms of, they're wanting to have a podcast as well. And so, I mean, a lot of these marketing budgets, at least in terms of the larger healthcare agencies, that's what they're looking at. And so that brings me to one of the topics I wanted to cover with you. You have a podcast. What do you cover? What are sort of the topics that you hit?
Yeah, no, thanks, Don. I think the reason I started a podcast too, if you just look on Apple Podcasts or any of the big major streaming platforms, there's really a lack of what I feel really good podcasts that get into, there's some really sciencey technical things out there, and there's a couple like news format style podcasts in the life sciences space, but I'm trying to fill this void to really come in and talk about, taking a deep dive into the whole biotech ecosystem. And the reason it's called RX for biotech is we want to be prescriptive. We want to prescribe new ways of working. So to that point, I'm looking to invite disruptors in the industry, whether that's healthcare providers, agencies and vendors, people who are looking at health technology, different technology stacks, different ways of doing things to help make sure that these life-saving products that we're talking about, the patients have access to them, and that healthcare providers are educated on appropriate utilization. And so I want to bring that awareness of these innovative new treatments, disrupting the care model, what we should be doing differently, and just getting those insights out. So this podcast is really geared towards more of a commercial, medical, and scientific leadership at biotechnology and pharmaceutical companies and cell and gene therapy companies. I think I do have a following with a secondary audience with, a good amount of healthcare providers from both academic and community treatment centers who we've been working with that also listen in. So that's really the passion around the podcast and the information that we're trying to share with the audience.
Yeah, I mean, it's always great to meet somebody else that's doing this as well, and glad to hear that you're out there trying to fill that void. I sort of did the same exact thing. I mean, whenever I was getting ready to start my consulting business, I mean, I wanted to make sure that I had sort of the perspectives of the pulse of the industry, right? And so went out and did a survey, and what I found was that, I mean, some of the ones that were called popular, let's say on Apple Podcast, weren't ones that, I enjoyed listening to. And then, I sort of went back to these, some of my core. I mean, Chris Connor with his, life science marketing, podcast is one, that I've frequently gone back to, sort of get. And then just recently, because of our introduction as well, I started listening to yours as well. So, glad to have, other voices in the marketplace that I enjoy listening to as well.
Yeah, no, thanks, Don. And it's it's fun. It's an interesting medium, and you can see the numbers growing and listenership go up. I'm starting to get more feedback and engagement on topics and so forth. I think that's great. Yeah, but these are the kinds of tools we're talking about, like in today's world, with so many technology options available, and our customer, their time is so limited. that, and really the pandemic really drove the popularity of podcasts now. But there's other mediums as well, and things, live events that I think pharma could be utilizing more. Um, they tend to be very risk averse and move slowly in those directions. But I think if you want to be meaningful and meet your customers where they are to deliver your message, you need to be looking at how to compliantly be able to do more of these things. So
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, I actually have somebody that I've sort of worked with before on a different podcast as well, and then this one will be released in the new year, from one of the big pharma companies, and I was sort of surprised whenever he was allowed to be on the podcast. But it was, it'll be interesting to see this episode come out. So I guess you'll have to keep watching to try and watching or listening to try and figure out who exactly it might be. But I was truthfully surprised and honored that at least somebody could be on from one of the big pharma companies, and who knows, maybe that's a indication that the tide will eventually change as well.
Well, I think it will. I think, there was a time not too long ago, a few years ago, where companies were reluctant to do anything on social media or to have a YouTube channel, and post videos. But I think that's something you're starting to see more of. You're starting to see more of that. You're starting to see more video content and and media on social media. And not all companies are comfortable with it. But the platforms have done a better job at allowing you to turn off comments or moderate content. Those are some of the barriers to adoption of social media, for example. But this is the way people are communicating today. It's
Yeah.
it's due to limited time and a lot of other factors. So we have to find a way to make it work, and that's part of what I love doing in my role now.
Yeah, I continually tell people, I'm like, look, if you Google something today, look right under whatever the thing was that you Googled, and the first thing that appears right under the sort of paid ads typically are videos. If there are videos that support that topic, they're the number one thing that's in there. So that's the one reason why we're here. And in addition to that, I mean, there are people that just like to sort of listen and learn on the go. And for those people, the audio medium of podcasting is very important as well. So, yeah. So,
Yeah,
Chris, there are
fully
three
agree.
questions that I like to ask every guest. First of all, what inspires you?
Yeah, I think I seek inspiration in many different ways, Don. I think, first and foremost, my inspiration is in the outdoors. So I get outdoors every day in some capacity, and depending on the season, my activity outdoor will vary. Right now, we're in the winter months, and I do a lot of trail running in the snow up in the mountains, or downhill skiing, for example. And I just, what's interesting is it's inspiring to me because I do some of my best thinking out there. I don't know if it's the majesty of the mountains or whatnot, or the outdoors, but I always come back refreshed and ready to tackle, and just be creative, in my work. So but I seek inspiration through, just doing a lot of reading. I'm constant, I feel like part of the job I have for clients is just to stay up to speed on technology and the science in the space that we're focused on. And so I guess it's the scientist in me. I'm still very much inspired by the work that's going on right now to help alleviate human suffering. And, I think it's those are things that sort of motivate me and inspire me. And I try to every day just chip away at those things.
Yeah, so important. And then what concerns you?
I think I'm concerned about the future, and it's part of why I'm focusing in this sort of advanced regenerative space. I'm worried about patient access to many of these potentially life-saving new products. And in the mainstream media, you might hear a lot about the cost of these products. That's less of a concern to me than just our ability in the U.S. in particular to sort of evolve our care model to enable access and remove healthcare disparities, and to make sure there's equity out there, so that anyone in the U.S. who is a potential candidate for one of these new treatments, that they have access to that. And I'm worried that some of the policies that we have, I've been on the record a lot recently about the Inflation Reduction Act. I'm worried about future innovation in the industry. I'm worried about the implications longer term of these new policies on innovation in the industry and the ability to bring new products to market because of the R&D investment, the cost, and then you know the shorter periods of exclusivity to recoup those those profits because of policy evolution. So I mean, those are the kind of some of the things that worry me longer term, and it's some of the things that I'm trying to help influence and change in my role in helping companies and advise them.
Yeah, it's very concerning from that standpoint, and thank you for sharing that one. I typically don't sort of think a lot about the policy and the impact overall in the organizations, but at the same time, you're absolutely right. Last question: what excites you?
I I touched on it a little bit here today, Don, but I think what really excites me and what gets me out of bed early in the mornings is the science in here. I mean, I talked about my early career at Amgen as an immuno-oncologist and cell biologist, and I'm coming back nearly 2 decades later and seeing now for the first time our ability, sort of our understanding of disease, but also new tools like CRISPR gene editing and how we're able to take these technologies and now use our own cells, our own immune cells, um, in our own healing journeys is absolutely it excites me beyond belief, and this is why I've really dedicated the remainder of my working career to this space to really help over the next 5 or 10 years bring these new therapies to market for these patients. We're seeing unbelievable. We just came off the back of the American Society of Hematology meeting this past weekend, where we saw updates in these CAR T therapies, these cell therapies for blood tumors, and some early new data for new pipeline products, Don. And I think this is the kind of thing that really inspires me and motivates me and excites me, is about the possibility of really making a difference in some of these different cancers, um, making a difference in patients' lives. And so that's what that's what
Yeah.
gets me excited every day in the work that I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I frequently tell people, I'm not the bench scientist, so unfortunately, I don't have the same sort of horsepower that you or others in the space do in terms of like really looking at things. I can help people with execution, sort of seeing clarity, but can't really, help with regards to scientific challenges and things like that. But I'm grateful that there are great people in our industry that are working on all these things as well, and it is very exciting.
It's exciting times, for all of us working in the industry. I know a lot of people that I've met in this space who are super passionate. They're all here. They all have personal stories to share about what their passion in this space on, and I'm certainly the same, and super excited to be able to be at this point where I can help companies bring these therapies to market.
So as we get ready to close, I just wanted to give you an opportunity. What is the name of your podcast?
Oh, it's RX for biotech. So if you just go into your favorite streaming service, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Apple Podcasts, type in RX for biotech, or just even type in biotech, you'll see it. You'll see it pop up. And yeah, we're running strong. We have a lot of good episodes, and if there's go back and look at some. My episodes on cell and gene therapy tend to be some of the more popular ones, but I've done a lot of other episodes as well that your audience may be interested in getting caught up on. And if anyone has any ideas for topics that they'd like to hear more of, feel free to DM me on my LinkedIn or on my email, which is it's on my LinkedIn page if people want to email me directly.
Okay. And then how can they find out more about your consulting business? Where would they go for that?
Sure, but they could go to they could go to LinkedIn to Boulder Biotech Launch Specialists. They can go to Boulder Biotech Launch Specialists.com to the website, and they can email me directly at chris@bblsconsulting.com to learn more about our Launch Accelerator program and how we can work with help them with their needs, or just answer any questions around the marketplace.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for being a guest on the Life Science Success Podcast. I greatly appreciate you being here and sharing with me everything that you're doing, as well as what you're doing in terms of trying to get the word out with your podcast as well. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Don. It was a pleasure, and happy holidays.
Oh, same to you.